We know that in order to register a new user, we need to execute our create user mutation. However, when it comes to testing queries and mutations on the client, we don't have to head back to GraphQL. We don't have to head to Insomnia again. We can use some special Apollo developer tools in order to execute what we need right here within the browser. We just need to open up our console by right-clicking and hitting Inspect. And once you have the developer tools installed, you can hit the arrow button here in the top right-hand corner and select Apollo. And since we've connected to our backend using our Apollo client, we get complete access to our schema as well as to a graphical interface where we can execute what we like based off of our schema. Note that from this main graphical interface, you can execute both queries and mutations right here. You don't have to go to the Queries or Mutations tabs. Also be aware that you won't be able to execute anything that requires a JSON Web Token if you're unauthenticated. All the same rules are still going to apply to our API. However, this will still be very helpful in testing queries. So let's try writing out our create user mutation and then include it in our register component. If we take a look at the Documentation Explorer, we can revisit what arguments are necessary for our create user mutation. And since we're going to provide dynamic values, not hard-coded values, to this mutation, we need to use GraphQL variables. So let's close the Documentation Explorer if you have it open. And we'll write out our mutation. Remember to add the mutation keyword. Then we'll declare our three variables: username with a type of string and required, email with the type of string and required, password will be string and required. And note that this won't resolve successfully unless everything is exactly as it appears in our schema. So make sure you're including this exclamation point for each of these arguments when declaring the types for the variables. Then we have our create user mutation. We'll supply its name and then pass in each of these values contained within the variables. So we'll pass the username variable to the username argument, email variable to the email argument, and the corresponding password variable to the password argument. We're going to get our created user data back on this user field, and from it we can supply username, email, and we don't want to have our password returned to us, our hashed password returned to us on the client. And then within our query variables section, we'll supply values to these three variables. First to username, we'll say Fred, email fred@yahoo.com, and password lowercase fred. So let's execute this mutation, and we see that a user was created. So what's helpful about our Apollo tools is that we can just, when we run a mutation or operation successfully, we can copy what we wrote, we can test it out, copy what we wrote, and then bring it into the relevant component.